my mother and my grandmother used to tell me that I would always push them to the closet and tell them what colors they should wear. I don't remember that, that's what they said. And then earlier on, as the years progressed, and I started sketching and collecting, sort of basically saving different ideas in my sketchbooks, and it was sort of a tradition when the ladies would travel, they would bring back different fabrics from different parts of the world wherever they went, and then they would come over to our place and sort of hang out with my mom and over a cup of coffee, and we would discuss designing for them, which led to me going to the seamstresses with them at the age of like 10, 12, and I would literally design the dresses and talk to the seamstress, and things would come out close to what the design was at the time. My parents were very supportive, and they saw that there was something unique about what it is that I was doing, basically, and that I'm very passionate about it, to the point where I was skipping homework and sketching till 2, 3 in the morning. I do not advise that, but that is what I was doing at the time, and that led to leaving to the States and starting to study design. I went to school called Brooks College in Long Beach, which is no longer there. I was not a fan of that school in particular, so I did drop out 6 months later, and I decided I was determined to build a name and learn as I was going on my own.
Maybe we can omit that from the file.
Should I edit?
I think that was
That's
great.
not to
Listen,
say.
I'll tell you something. I went against the grain. I honestly think it's very important to learn all the basics. I think for me personally, it was difficult. It had pluses and negatives to it, but the fact that you are in school, I mean, I'm not condoning don't go out on your own, because it's a harder road, but I think the school in particular that I was in, honestly, it was just a flop, basically. And then there was a class act lawsuit I was not a part of against the school, but that just was a particular case back in the day. So I stayed in retail, and I worked in retail for many, many years, and I ended up working at this boutique in Melrose, and I became the buyer and the merchandiser of the store. And during that time, with the help of my father, I bought 2 sewing machines, a single needle and an overlock. And I started learning, basically, throughout the 5 years of retail, during the weekends, literally sewing, buying vintage jackets, dresses, you name it, taking it apart, and then understanding pattern making and things like that. And I think through your mistakes, you learn the most. And I made a lot of mistakes, I'm sure. But that's where draping came into play, because I didn't know the rules of pattern construction. So I just started sort of draping different fabrics and developing new silhouettes, and I didn't know that that was later to become something that I would be known for, but luckily it did. Through selling my pieces at the time on consignment during this boutique, and then calling up different boutiques and stores and not having basically fear, or I was not jaded into, oh, there's a right or wrong way. There's no right or wrong way. If you're determined, I think if you're ambitious to do something, you will find a way to do it. And that ended up, for me, to walk into a boutique literally with a dress form, which designers don't usually do back in the early 90s, and a rolling rack, and showing them my clothes, and it turned out to be one of the hottest boutiques in West Hollywood at the time, the Alvelina. And she sold to all the celebrities, you name it, Jessica Alba, that's how I started dressing her, Jada Pinkett Smith, Tori Spelling, Aaliyah before she passed. So that's how I developed a relationship with stylists, through where I used to work at the time, and then through selling at these boutiques. So I think it's important to be creative of how to sort of eventually get your work out. And interning for a designer is great, but it's very important to make sure that you don't fall into that web of being stuck sort of under someone. You have to kind of be creative, because you're in a creative field. And creativity of how to market yourself in your business, there are no limits to that eventually. Honestly, the story can go on and on. That led to Project Runway, it led to wholesaling and building my own sort of atelier of training sewers, how to make clothes and dresses and the quality that I needed to do and sort of maintain. And that led to selling to Harrods, my first department store in London, which was a huge accomplishment for someone who was basically being a production manager, designer. I literally went from cutting 60 pieces on the floor to eventually building a team. So I think it's important to get your hands dirty in every part of the business, because they're all different languages that eventually take part into the final product, which is the design, So don't be afraid to make mistakes. Don't be afraid to try new things in new ways, and challenge yourself. I think that's the most important thing. To me, this is a new venture, BB, and it's very fortunate to have an amazing team like Vivi and work on such a collection, the bridal collection, because evening wear is in my blood, and I think having done custom and created and worked with brides exclusively gave me that experience to lead up to this, and I think it's been also a learning experience for me to work with such a big company, which is also has a lot of importance in terms of numbers and sales and marketing, and not, I mean, if any advice I could give you, honestly, talent is not enough. You have to, there are too many people out there who are not talented, who are business sharks, who tend to sort of beat you to the race to it. So you have to create the balance of like left and right brain. You have to be able to learn how to put your product out there and find out what it is that makes you stand apart from the rest. And always know that just because you love what you do doesn't mean it's not going to be difficult. So you have to accept that there are times that are going to be very challenging. It's a love and hate relationship. You know, this business has some amazing moments that are so glamorous for a few minutes, and it has some very difficult moments, obviously. So understand that just because you're passionate about something because you love it, that's the first thing. But also that it doesn't mean that it's going to be easy. But it has its moments where you stop and you look back and think, wow, I did this. So it has its rewarding moments. And I'll take questions. I tried to like shrink it into a little.
Does anyone want to know how he got onto Project Runway?
Sure. During season 2, I started noticing people like Nick Varios, which is somebody I knew at the time, and he was on Project Runway. So out of curiosity, I went to one of the castings for season 3.
That's right. Thank you. She'll be better in the morning.
And basically, I went to the audition. I met with Tim Gunn, and I brought a girlfriend of mine, put her in one of my gowns. And from the moment I walked in, I felt like they were very excited to see my work and see me, basically, where they pushed me up to the next level, saying, we don't need a video from, like, basically, you're almost in. And I think I got a little bit afraid of the whole idea of throwing myself into reality. I was producing and shipping to a lot of different stores, and after sort of going over the contract, I decided not to do it. So I said no. Season 4 came around, and that's when they were casting, and I wasn't planning on going to it. Tim Gunn and Jennifer Egan, who is she's basically the talent, the woman who finds talent from Gen Art, nonprofit organization, which I have showed with them twice, once in New York and once in LA. And that also came from putting clothes on consignment. That's how she